Hey guys, welcome to the Columbia View Church podcast. We're excited to share God's Word with you. If you'd like to get more connected here at Columbia View Church, please visit our website at www.columbiaview.org. Our Sunday morning worship time is 10 a.m. We are meeting on site now and following the social distancing guidelines put forth by our state. And we love the opportunity to meet you in person, and we hope that you are blessed by this word today.
Not be seated? Would you be willing to go pass these out for me? I started on this side, so I'm partway down on this side, but the other's not. That's all right. Thanks, Jenna. That was awesome. I don't know. We'll find out. I told somebody that this was light. We're hooked in the cables. All right.
This is really not light.
I know. I thought it was light.
It's like my ranch.
She's using her ranch girl muscle, she said. All right. Well, it is good to be here this morning with you. Here, we'll toss that over there. You know, when the printer prints on both sides of the page and you didn't mean for it to, and I just threw this away, but I'm hoping that there's still another page of notes in here, or we're going to be just going. All right, well, let's see what I remember. No, it should have printed at my house. So it's like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter. I can do this. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not like thinking. Oh, maybe this is it, like right there. Oh, that's good. That makes it more fun. All right, so Jenna and I have been talking kind of extensively about the concept of how vulnerable are you when you're up here? So like she's, leading worship, and it's like, do I tell you about my brother, or do I just do the song, right? And so here's the thing: if you're transparent and vulnerable, it can be really impacting. Right, so when Jenna was sharing a while back about depression, and she has been struggling with depression and stuff, it's like somebody in the audience out there going, wow, she struggles with depression too? Man, and God uses her like that? Gosh, maybe I'm still okay, right? So that's where it comes in. But if Ken stands up and tells too many stories about himself, then somebody else is thinking, dude, does that guy think about anything besides himself? Right? So, I mean, there's this trade-off. So I could have started this sermon today telling a tale of two girls, okay? Two girls. They had a wonderful dad who was smart and wise and wealthy, and he was just a great dude. And these two girls, one of them, the older one, she could talk to her dad about anything because he was the kind of guy that she could just talk to about anything, and he would give her advice and counsel and just help with whatever. And when she had a friend that needed a car, she'd be like, Dad, he needs a car, and Dad might help, right? But if it was her that needed a car, she just couldn't talk to Dad about that kind of thing. Now, her sister could talk to Dad about anything. She could get the advice, and she could get help with her rent, and she could get, because she would go talk to Dad and say, Dad, I've got this need, and she trusted that her dad could say, okay, I can help you with that, or you know what, pull up your big girl pants, and you got to do that yourself. So I could have started off this sermon like that. But I'm not. I'm going to go with the more vulnerable version, okay? Because I want to tell you what God has been doing in my life and what He's been transforming in me in the last 6 weeks, okay? And my buddy Pete is here with me. He's been walking this with me. We've been co-jointly doing this story, and so he came to hear the message today. So here's how the story begins. I got a buddy named Steve that I play ball with all the time for years. Okay, and we're old, right? But we've been playing basketball 3 days a week for 20 years, right? And so we talk. We're friends, right? And he's been going through having kind of a rough time in his marriage. So it's been a struggle. It's been hard times. A bunch of counseling. They've been working hard. And it got to a place where it was looking like it was unavoidably coming to an end. Okay, and I wasn't like surprised either, right? Because we've been talking about this for a long time. So as his wife is handing him the keys to say, maybe you should find your own place, she handed him a last book. Like, here's one more counseling thing that you maybe should try, right? And when he told me that, I kind of laughed. And he's like, but I read this book and I started doing this thing and it's been amazing. And I was like, okay, well, he's my buddy. I'll buy the book. So let's see here. Let's see if we can get these slides to pull up. I have not used this before. So I have to power this thing up first. There we go. All right, so how do I run it? How do I get to run this thing? Yeah, where do I aim this someplace? All right, so we're just going to do it old-fashioned, and you're going to click the buttons for me? All right, that's good enough for me. So this is a picture of the book, all right? How We Love by Milana and Kay Yurkovich or something, right? So I get the book on audiobook. I'm listening to it at work, and I'm like, this is really interesting. And basically, the premise is that there's things that we've experienced in our growing up years that cause us to love, or it sounds really positive how we love, but it's more of how we love brokenly. And there's like these 5 different ways, and I'm not going to go into all of that, except that I took the little quiz because I was hanging with my buddy, right? So I took my little quiz, and on a scale of 1 to 10, in one section I came out of 5, and that said that I was a avoider. Okay. What that meant basically is I'm pretty independent, and if anybody knows me, I'm pretty independent, right? I can take care of myself, so I consider that a good trait. Most avoiders do consider that a good trait, and it is a great trait. But generally the problem with avoiders is it happened because they didn't get nurtured very much as a kid, and so. I can share this. I didn't ask for Sel, but when she's actually probably an avoider too. She doesn't know that yet, but she's probably an avoider. And they when she was growing up, if she was sick in their household, then you just went to your room and were sick by yourself. Okay, so in my household, if I was sick and I was over the toilet and I was puking, my mom was in there with her hand on my back, right? You're okay, I love you, right? And so there's this nurturing that doesn't take place, and everybody's kind of on a spectrum with all of that, right? So that's what usually causes someone to be an avoider and very, very self-independent is maybe they lack a lot of nurturing growing up. And they generally are not very good nurturers, because that wasn't part of their system. Right, so there's these 5 different areas, and so I'm talking with Steve about that, and I'm like, I don't think this really applies very negatively to me, right? We're standing outside a car because the truth is, if you guys know me, I'm a nurturer as I breathe, right? So you see me with my granddaughters, see me hugging Jenna. Jenna's like one of my extra kids, and I mean that is just I nurture. That's part of who I am. So I'm talking to Steve, and he's like asking some of these pointed questions, like a counselor kind of might, kind of thing. And he's like, well, why don't you share more about that? And so I share two stories with him, which really make me look like I'm like in what's that word when you're in denial, right? So I go, well, Steve, there was this one time that my dad was a pastor growing up, and we didn't have hardly any money. We were poor. Right? I didn't know it, but we were poor. So when my dad started making $200 a week, I thought we were rich. Right? I was like, woohoo! Right? $200 a week? I mean, I remember my dad's salary was $125 a week at one point. And so we were up in Idaho, and so my family's always been very good with their money, but I never got an allowance. I didn't ever ask my dad for money. And he taught me like how to work. I mowed lawns, I cleaned the church. I did all this stuff for money. And so I'm in high school, and we're going to go on this track meet. And this track meet is like a long drive, one of those 3-hour drive ones. And on the way back, we're going to be stopping at McDonald's. And I can still remember this, though I have processed much of this in my counseling stuff early in my life. But I remember this. I'm upstairs in my bedroom, and I'm like, I'm going to ask Dad, because for whatever reason, I was out of money. And I was like, I'm going to ask Dad if I can get $3 for McDonald's on the trip home. And I have to I screw up my courage a little bit. And I go down the stairs. Dad's in the kitchen. But hey, Dad, we're going to go to Jerome, for this track meet, and we're going to stop at McDonald's on the way back. Can I get $3 for that? And he asked me the question that I knew, right? He's like, where's your money? And I went back upstairs, and I said, I will never ask for money again. Decision made, right? Now, if you've ever gone through counseling, they'll be like, yeah, that's probably one of those sticking points, right? When you make these like self promises, that's usually not a healthy thing, right? And like I said, I've kind of worked through that, but so it doesn't have a lot of emotional impact on me at this point, but at that time it did. It was like boom, it locked that down, and I did become more independent, right? So he's like, oh, well, you think maybe that might be affecting you? I'm like, I already worked through that, Steve. You don't know, right? So then the other one is like, as long as I've been alive, people have come to me when they need help, okay? So they come to talk to me. I'm that listening ear. I was always the friend that all the girls loved as a friend and never wanted to date. I was that guy. And, didn't know if I'd ever find one. And but people would always share with me because, and the truth is that's because that's how God designed me. He designed me to be able to do that. And everybody, has a different capacity for everything, right? But that's one of the gifts he's given me. And it showed up early in my life, and it's just part of who I am. And I remember I was up at Camp Tadmore. I was probably 21. It was summer. Sel and I met. And we only had 24 hours off each week. And so I go down to my cabin, and everybody else took off, and no one invited me, right? So I'm by myself, and now I'm playing my guitar, and I remember I just talking to God about this, because that hurt my feelings, But what was the bigger issue was like, God, I always give more than everybody else, and it seems like no one ever gives back to me. No one ever takes care of me, right? But as I sat down, I was playing my guitar, learning how to play guitar, and I was just strumming it, and I was just like, but God, I also know that you have designed me with capacity to care for people that most people don't have. So the truth is, if I say I'm only going to love people as much as they love me, then a part of who I am is going to be cut off. It's going to be like chopping off two arms. And I just went, okay, God, I'm going to trust you to meet my deepest emotional needs and my longings. And I'm going to love people the way you designed me to love them without an expectation. And then whatever, comes back to me, that's great. But I'm okay with that. And I settled that at that moment. And so Steve looks at me and is like, oh, well, seems like maybe that be something you should explore a little bit more, right? Is that one of those kind of promises things? I'm like, nah, that's not one of those. But I went away. I listened. I'm not totally ignorant. I listened to my friend, and I thought about this, because I was like, am I bringing some of those avoider traits into my life? And I walked away going, you know what? I'm pretty comfortable with who I am. But I realized there is one weird thing. And that is, if Jeremy has a need, I can pray for Jeremy and ask God to bless him abundantly. If Jenna needs money, I pray that God would look on her with favor and that her boss would just open up the checkbook. And to be honest, I've seen God answer those prayers, right? I've had people come back and go, "Ken, you will not believe my boss just gave me this raise," kind of thing, right? But for me to go, "Daddy, could you bless me financially?" Man, those words almost stick in my throat. I don't know. Maybe that's a holdover from when I walked down the stairs, right? But that is really hard. So I just was like, I think that's something I need to look at. And so I know that Steve didn't think that I was really doing the hard work that I was supposed to be doing, but that was the work that God was doing in me. And so I remembered a sermon from a long time ago, and it was out of 1 Chronicles 10. So let's click to that. Sorry, 1 Chronicles 4, verse 10. It's called the Prayer of Jabez. Now, this passage, let's do a little context for this, okay? So we're in 1 Chronicles 4, and it's this guy begot this person, begot this person, begot this person. Jimmy had Steve, and Steve had Carrie, and right? The genealogies that you always skim over because they mean absolutely nothing to us, right? But they met somebody, right? And then you come to verse 4, and it says, right in the middle of this genealogy, it says, "Now Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. And his mother named him Jabez, saying, because I bore him in pain." Okay, boy, that's a great name, right? Gosh, you hurt when you came out. I'm going to call you Pain, right? So in the middle of this, it's just all these names. All of a sudden he says, and Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. And his mom named him this. And then it says, let's go next slide. And Jabez called on the God of Israel. What? Yeah, Jabez called on the God of Israel. And he said, this is his prayer. 1, oh, that you would bless me indeed. Actually, the Hebrew, it's that you would bless me and bless me. Okay? Would you bless me a lot? God, would you just give me a really big double portion of blessing? Right? You know who else did that? One of the prophets did that. Was it, who comes first, Elijah or Elisha? Said Elijah's the first one. And then when Elisha is going to take the mantle, he says to Elijah says to him, is there something I can do for you? And he says, yeah, give me a double portion. Right? A double portion of your blessing, of your ministry. And he was like, well, I don't know if I can do that. But if you see me when I'm taken up to heaven, it'll be yours. So he's not the first guy that ever said this. Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, and that your hand might be with me, and that you would keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me. And God granted him his request. And then he begot, right? We have, that's all we know about Jabez. There's nothing else in the Bible about him, okay? Is that in the midst of this genealogy, he was better than his brothers, and he prayed this prayer, and God said, yeah. Okay? So, there's a guy named Bruce Wilkinson. He wrote a little book about this, and he's from the Walk Through the Bible guy. So I got his book. I pulled up a couple books about this prayer. I studied the Hebrew stuff on this. I really looked into this, okay? And I think this is about as good a translation of that as you get. Oh, that you would super bless me, that you would enlarge my territory, that you would expand my borders, and that your hand would be with me, and that you would keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me. Okay, so I started reading that, and I was like, oh, so is it okay to ask God to bless me? Right? I can ask God to bless tyranny. I know that. That's like as easy as pie. But is it okay for me to say, God, would you bless me a lot? So then my cousin Tom, some of you guys know him. He's always big on the Sermon on the Mount. And so I started reading I was listening to the Sermon on the Mount at work. And as I listened to it, God showed me some new stuff. And so we're going to kick through this really quick, okay? So let's go next slide. Verse 7 of chapter 7 of Matthew says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. The one who knocks, the door will be open. Okay, so asking, seeking, knocking, those are actively me coming to God, right? Saying, hey, can you? Right? Okay? This is the Bible. This is Jesus teaching, by the way, right? So if Jesus teaches it, is it probably okay? Okay, because this is not some health and wealth gospel thing. I hope you guys get that. But this is God, what he says, okay? Next slide. 7:9. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, you'll give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, that's nice, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven, your heavenly Daddy, give good gifts to those who ask him? Right? Dang it. Those who ask him. Okay, all right. So next slide. Chapter 8, verse 2. Jesus came down from the mountainside, and a large crowd followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Did he ask God for the miracle? Kind of. He showed up, said, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Jesus says, I'm willing, right? When Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came up to him asking for help. Asking for help. The guy traveled to track down Jesus to ask him for what he wanted. And then he said, and Jesus is like, well, you want me to go, heal him? And he's like, no, you don't really have to come because I'm a man under authority and I know that when I tell somebody to go do something, they do it. And so if you just say the word, I know that he'll be healed. And Jesus is like, oh wow. None of the Jews around here have that kind of faith, But he traveled and asked. Next slide. When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw, who's he? Jesus, right? So when Jesus came into Peter's house, Jesus saw Peter's mother-in-law lying on bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and her fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. Did she ask for his help? No, right? So can God just know things and help? See things, volunteer? Yeah, right? Next slide. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and they were helpless like sheep without a shepherd. So do you know people that are harassed and helpless? Like sheep without a shepherd? Man, don't we live in a world that's so full of that? Right? But then he said to his disciples, this is Jesus talking, right? Direct quote. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So Jesus is saying there is a great need for workers. So is God aware that there is a great need for workers? Nod your head. He's the one bringing it up. He's saying the harvest is plentiful, but there's not very many workers out there. And then he says to the disciples, you ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest field. Now, I don't even understand that because Jesus knows the problem and he says to Pete, ask me to send out workers. I don't know. These are just things I noticed as I was going along, right? So I began to pray Jabez's prayer. At first, a little bit more hesitantly and maybe with a little bit of apologetic feel to it, but then bolder with it. It's like, God, would you really bless me? I mean, every day, Lord, would you bless me like in a big way? Lord, would you expand my borders? Lord, would you give me bigger influence on people's lives? Lord, would you bless our real estate business? We need more money it's an ever-consuming cash cow business we're in. So you have a project, you need more funds, you need people to lend money. It's like this thing, right? And just asking my Heavenly Father directly, not beating around the bush, but just saying, bless me. And I'm going to get into the other part here in just a little bit, so I'm going to stop there. But two things happened this last couple weeks since I've been praying that. We work with professionals in the real estate industry, and we have not loan officers, but title agents. And I work with the president of the branch at Lloyd Center of Lawyers Title. And so we run all our title stuff through her. And so she sees all of our transactions, and she understands the whole thing about private money that like maybe Jeremy's got $100,000 and it's sitting in the market and it's not making any money. And so he's like, yeah, I'd love to lend on your project. We'll put you on the title of the house so that if something happens, you get your money. It's the way a bank gets their money, like in a second position mortgage kind of situation, right? And he's like, I can give you a double-digit return on your investment. And he's like, well, I'm only making 1% right now. Right? So we're always kind of looking for that kind of stuff, people who are interested in that kind of thing. So our title agent goes, hey, call me. And I'm like, cool. So we call her. She's like, yeah, we got some money we'd really like to invest. A couple weeks later, my husband's not so much, right? So it's not going to work out. Oh, that's okay. Maybe later, right? So now, this has just been a couple weeks ago. I'm praying these prayers about God blessing our business. And she calls me and says, I was camping with my sister-in-law and brother, my husband's brother. And we were talking about this private money thing. And they've got real money. And they would like to meet you. So I'm like, man, that was just like not very long after I prayed. And I was like, that's crazy. And then, but I always kind of nervous because a bunch of people have said they want to do that, and then they bail out. And so I finally met with her this week, right? I met with her and her husband this week, and they're like, yeah, we're in, right? Yeah, we'd like to do $80,000 on this project that you have. Oh, and by the way, we have $700,000 more, like if you wanted to do a whole project. And my brother and dad in Mexico, they would probably like to invest. That's a good day, folks. If you're in my business, that's a very good day, okay? But it's like, God, expand my territory, expand my reach, expand my ability to connect with people. Bruce Wilkins always says he'll pray that prayer and he'll be like, God, today, let me bless somebody, let me connect with somebody. And then he says, my question is always just, what can I do for you? And he's got some amazing stories. If you guys ever want that book, I'll get you the book. But the other night, I'm driving back. This is Monday or Tuesday. I work all night, and I'm on 122nd in Fremont. I pull up at the light. It turns red. I pull up at the light. It turns green. I just start to go. I'm in my big work truck. It's got a big service body on the back of it. And all of a sudden, boom! And it does that, that if you've ever been in a rear ender, it's like, oh! And I'm like, I've had these before. I got hit by trucks before. It's like, oh, my back is shot now. Got it. I know what it's going to be. I'm going to have about 30 hours in the chiropractor and massage and all this stuff and rehab. It's just like I'm going, I do not have time for this. So I get out of my truck, and so I'm on the driver's side. So I get out of my truck, and I turn, and she's at the crosswalk, blew me through the intersection. She hit me going like probably 30. And so I'm walking back, and you can be angry, right? But that doesn't really serve anything. So I walk back, and she opens her door, and she's crying. She reminds me of Vanessa. She's a little bit, maybe 10 years older than Vanessa. A Hispanic young mom, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old. And she's just hyperventilating and crying. And I work at nights. I'm so tired, and I just close my eyes for just a minute. And she's just fallen asleep, right? And since I work nights and drive, I know what that feels like. And, I'll just close my eyes for just a second. Never good. And so she hit me probably going 30 because she didn't wake up until boom, right? And so she's just melting down in that parking lot or that street. I'm like, it's okay. Do you have somebody we can call? She's like, yeah, we can call my husband. And I'm like, it's okay. So tell me about your family. She's in shock. And so we get her pulled off onto this crossroad. And I pull my van over. And her car's not drivable home because the radiator's blown up and all the fluid's on the ground. And so I'm like, let's call your husband. She can't find her phone. We call her phone. We can't find it in the car. We don't know what's going on. So she calls on my phone. He doesn't answer. I'm like, hey, how about if I take you home? So she gets in my truck. I drive her home. And as we're getting out, she's getting ready to get out. I'm like, can I pray for you? And a blessing for you? And she's like, yes. And so I just pray, and I pray about her work, because she was like, my husband was concerned me working nights. I've only been working nights for a month, and I'm always really tired. But today, I just knew that if I could I had an appointment at 8, if I could drive straight home, I could sleep for like 3 or 4 hours, and that would be better than me sleeping in the parking lot. I should have pulled over. So I was just like, God, help her with her job, figure out whatever, they need to do with that. And so I only say all that. I'm not... Because I was moving in a sphere of grace that was a God thing, okay? I mean, I picked this lady up and carried her, and she was the one that smacked into me. And that was just a God thing. And I knew it when it was happening, I could just feel it. So I talked to her yesterday to check about some information on the insurance stuff, right? And she goes, Ken, I just want you to know how great it was to meet you. She goes, I know this all happened for a reason, because when you prayed for me, something happened. And I called my boss, and I told him I couldn't come into work the rest of the week, and then they understood, and they moved me back to the day shift, and I'm just in a much better place, because she could have ran somebody over, right? Crossing the street. Instead, she hurt my service vehicle. It bent my bumper a little bit. It did. My back sucked, but it didn't do anything to my truck, right? Something much worse could have happened. But those were her words. She was like, something happened when you prayed for me. God, expand my borders, right? We don't know where that's going to be. Maybe it's getting our truck run into, right? Okay, so here's the thing. When I started praying about expanding my borders, then I started praying about God expanding my borders, okay? If you know me, I'm not really a halfway kind of guy. So, I'm starting to pray. I'm praying big prayers. I'm just asking God, I want to hear his voice. I want to, I want to be able to minister to people. God, would you just expand my capacity, right? And I'm up on the roof of McDonald's. I'm just crying. I'm just like, because he saw the crowds and he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And I'm like, God, if you will just pour, I'm just going to tell you the truth, guys. I just said, if you will pour wealth into my hands, I will give it away. Right? I'll give it away. I want to help more people, but I need more because the truth is we are very finitely limited, right? My capacity, I have 24 hours a day and I have so much money and I have, right? But the needs are infinite. And so if those needs are going to be met, that's got to come someplace and it can't be from me. So you have this little drawing here, right? So let's go next slide, see what comes up. Okay. So this is, man, I hope we're all, I can't see a clock, so we're just going to keep going. All right, so that's the tree, and it comes from the story of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so out of Daniel. So if you remember the story of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, we're going to go through it really quick. The king has this dream, and in this dream, he sees this tree that grows, and it reaches up to the sky. And you can see it from everywhere on the earth. And the birds make nests in it. The animals get lay underneath it. The people eat its fruit. The whole earth is fed and cared for by this tree. And so he sees, I see this big great tree, right? And then this angelic watcher comes down and he says, chop the tree down. Chop it down, but put bands around it. Because, King, you are going to lose your kingdom for 7 periods of time until you come to realize that the God of heaven puts whoever he wants in charge. And this tree that grew, it wasn't about you. And you're going to figure this out. So he asked Daniel to interpret the dream. Daniel's like, oh, king, if this would only for somebody else and not you, but I would suggest that you repent. So a year later, the king is up on his balcony of his palace, and he looks out over the great city of Babylon, one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. And he says, Babylon the Great, that I by my own power built. And boom, as the words come out of his mouth, the angelic watcher says, it's time. And he loses his mind. And the bands on the thing said that he would get his kingdom back, if I tell you that. So he goes out and he lives like in a park or someplace, and his fingernails grow, like that guy, the long fingernails in the Guinness Book of World Records, right? They had like the claw things. And his hair grows long, and he's eating grass. He's lost his mind. He's a crazy dude, right? And after the 7 periods of time, whatever that is, we don't know, he comes to his senses and he says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, know that the God of heaven is the infinite God, and he puts whoever he wants in charge. And then his advisors came and looking for him, and they put him back into his position as king. Okay. So this is really weird, right? I understand this because you got to go, Ken, you're not a king and you're not Babylon, you're nothing, okay? But for somehow this has been my picture. I want to be the big tree that is strong. And that God pours out, and we have been that. This has been our life. People have lived with us. I have all these extra children. And God has provided for us. And we have been this tree to so many people and families and things. And I'm like, God, I'm asking, I want you to bless me. I want you to expand me. I want you to blow that tree up. But this is what I know, is that you're screwed when you get wealth and you don't have humility. Okay? I mean, that's the nicest way of saying it. If God blesses you heavily and you don't have humility, then you're going to blow up. Your life's going to blow up. We've seen ministers get really significant ministries and just flush it down the toilet, right? But that's what's so cool about this prayer. So look at the bottom part. Next slide. Okay, so then I drew this. This is my own drawings, okay? That's the river of life that we've talked about so many times. The blue behind the tree, that's the river of life. That's the river of the water of life. It talks about it in Revelations. It's the Holy Spirit, right? And then it has roots, because any good tree, the root base, if you were able to go look underground, is bigger than the canopy. Because otherwise, if you have a tiny little root base and a big canopy and the wind blows, right? You blow over. And there's a verse that talks about being planted by the streams of water, that a righteous man and his roots go down into that water, like the aquifer that's underneath it. So that's the picture there. And here's what his prayer was: that your hand might be with me and that you would keep me from evil. That you would keep me from evil, that it might not grieve me. God, would you, just as much as bless me, would you protect me? I'm not asking you to say, I'm not saying just help me to avoid temptation. I'm saying, like, protect me from it. And you go, well, is that okay? Well, next slide. What does it say, in the Lord's Prayer? And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So we can pray that. Right? So it's God bless me, give me, just dump your good stuff on me. And then, Lord, expand my capacity to touch people, those lost and those broken. But God, as you give me wealth, I don't want it you can't serve God and money both. Right? So, God, don't let me be the one that enjoys the wealth and takes it as my own. Give me wealth, but let me do something with it. And God, then I beg you that you would give me humility, that you would protect me from the evil one, so that I would always know that it's my roots going deep into the rivers of the water of life, so that capacity can flow up through me, because I don't have time to help 5 people in this room. And sometimes you get to the place where you're like, I just talk to that person because I know, I'm not saying anything here. I'm just saying that you're out there, because Pete and I were talking about this week, that as you understand people better and you can connect at a deeper level, there are times when you know that you can help somebody, but then you go, but I'm scared that I'm going to have to help them too much. And I can't do it. So then I just close my mouth and I don't help at all, because I'm afraid. So what that requires is that we trust God, that we can tap into the Spirit of God, so that at every moment when we meet at that right time, that we can give that blessing, that we can share that wealth, that we can help somebody along the way, but that God's the one that's going to do it. And He'll give me all the resources that I need. And sometimes it's just giving grace to the lady who just ran into the back of your truck. And it was 5 minutes, 20 minutes. It was 20 minutes. And her life was impacted by God. And that's all it is. And then sometimes it's like, hey, why don't you move into our house? Right? All right. So we're going to close with this. Next slide. All right. Because this is what it boils down to. If God blesses us and He pours out on us and He expands our borders, He protects us from the evil one, it all comes down to this. You are the light of the world, and this world needs some light. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. So here's what it is. When the lady runs into your car in the middle of the night, this is what it is. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds. because they are your good deeds. God's increasing your capacity to do good deeds. And glorify. They're going to see your good deeds, Rochelle. They're going to see what you're doing, Jeremy. They're going to see what you're doing, Chris. And then they're going to glorify your Father in heaven, because it's like this. Last illustration. You get a light bulb. It can be shaped round. It can be shaped square. It has all kinds of shapes. It's a 100-watt light bulb. Oh, so pretty. When you turn the power on to the light bulb, it produces light. And now your room isn't dark anymore, right? When we do the good deeds that God has made us for, when we allow him and we ask him to expand us, we become a 100-watt, a 200-watt, a 500-watt light bulb, right? And it's not about the bulb. It's not about the, oh, well, that's I mean, now they have the Edison bulbs and it's all about how cool light shit, right? But it's like, it's not about the light bulb. It's about the light. And so when we let our roots tap down and we reach out to God and say, do this with me, do this through me, then people will see the light. And they're not going to glorify Lauren. They're going to glorify your God who is in heaven. And that's how they come to him. Anyway, so I would just encourage you guys. It's been working for me for the last month. I've been praying it every day. I mean, Lauren and I had a conversation 8 months ago, maybe. And I was like, I didn't have this yet, but I was encouraging you that God had something bigger for you, right? Well, this is how you get there. Okay? I didn't have that before. All right, so let's pray, and then we'll be dismissed. Oh, dear Daddy, we are your children. And Lord, the fact that we can come to you and we can ask you for just really good things, that you can just bless us indeed, Lord, that is so fun. And I thank you, Lord, I thank you for my brother who poked at me enough to get there. And I thank you, Lord, for revealing your scriptures to me so that I can come to a new place with you now. And I'm really excited. And so, Lord, I just, if any of this resonates for anybody else, God, I ask that you just keep speaking to them about it and that they would be emboldened to pray these prayers too. Thank you for giving us your word, God. We appreciate it. Amen.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Our passion is to know and share God's heart, and we're so glad that we're able to do that with you today. If you'd like to visit us in person, please visit our website at www.columbiaview.org for directions. We'll see you next week.